Hi there. I'm Gerry Huntman, Managing Director of IFWG Publishing. I've been doing a couple of interviews over recent times, and I'll be doing another one or two. And the reason why is really simple. IFWG has got a lot of fantastic new titles uh, clustered together in the October, November timeframe. And we have yet another interview today. And it's with Leanbh Pearson, who's the author of a reimagining of Viking mythology called Loki, Untangling A Tale. Now, before we get into that, I just wanted to thank everyone who's responded very well to our very first broadcast in this new cluster of interviews, and really appreciate that. And by all means, please spread the love to everyone, because we are doing a lot of work to really not only release books, but to get insights into the author's mind and their sort of motivations. And I think that really makes a difference when you read a book with having had witnessing these sorts of interviews. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Leanbh. And hello.
Hi, thank you, Jerry, for having me on.
No
And
problems at all.
hello to everyone watching.
Thanks very much. Now, I'll just give a quick warning that well, we were having a little bit of a chat before, and there may be one or two little spikes of lag activity. And hey, since COVID, I think we all sort of understand how that works in this world, don't we?
Yep.
But anyway, look, um, the usual thing, the usual thing. Actually, before I talk about the usual thing, um, today is the 3rd of October that we're recording this, but we're actually going to broadcast this interview on the actual release day of Loki, and that'll be on the 6th of October, so 3 days hence. So, with a time laggy sort of feel and mode to it, congratulations on your release.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess we can say Norse mythology is cyclic and very timey-wimey, so we're definitely part of this.
Yeah, look, I mean, what the hell we can do to anything? We can time travel and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are the future. Australia is officially always in front.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, look, I go back to the usual thing. The usual thing is that there will be people who will be watching the show who are not familiar with you, and so it's probably a good idea to introduce yourself in terms of your background as much as you want to talk about it, and also how it sort of slides into the writing space.
Yep. Yeah, so I suppose the first thing I should say, my alter ego is a academic in archaeology, history, um, especially sort of cultures around the world, and anthropology. So that's like my alter ego. I started writing fiction, always written fiction, and just love horror and dark fantasy, which is my sort of wheelhouse that I like to work in. I'm fascinated by mythology, by fairy tales, folklore, and I really love the space that we have in horror to and dark fantasy to kind of weave those old tales into something new. And I suppose, yes, I should also add that I am LGBTQI, trans, and also a disability author. So I'm advocating for invisible disabilities as well as those which are sort of more visible. So also, our kind of more mental challenges and sort of trying to break down stigmas and get real characters into real books.
Okay, that's a really good point, and maybe we can return when we talk a bit more about the main character in Loki, and see if we can sort of find some connections there. And I'd like to cover that off if you don't mind.
Yep.
Uh, okay, so okay, so your background, your alter ego. I should say, by the way, just look, I'm just throwing in a bit of a random thing. Is that both you and myself actually attended some of the same schools at the
Yep.
Australian National University, different years apart, I think. But yeah, so we've got something in common there.
Yep.
And yes, I do like skulls and sexing skulls and stuff like that.
Skulls and bones and yeah, bones
Yeah.
and monkeys. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I just thought I'd throw that one in.
Skulls and bones and old tools and archaeology.
Absolutely. Now, I'll just, there was a segue that you mentioned. That's a bit of a segue for me to ask a question. The you're talking about going into horror and dark fantasy. That's your wheelhouse, and I should also say to the world that I've had multiple collaborations with you,
Yep.
and so I'm very aware. But Loki was a little bit of a left fielder. You know, it sort of came out of the, went, wow, this is not the sort of stuff I normally see from you.
Yep.
Um, yes, you mentioned reimagining. Gosh, we can talk about that. But it's writing a reimagining of a complete and time frame separated culture
Yep.
of mythology is a big task. Um, what was your motivation to pick on that particular field?
Yep. I suppose I'm going to have to start with I always really enjoyed trickster characters. So these are figures that are in or folklore and mythology, like all around the world. So we have them in Australia, we have them in North America, and throughout Europe. And Loki is one of the trickster figures from Norse mythology. And for me, I was really fascinated by I'd read Rune Marks, which was a young adult sort of reimagining of Norse mythology, and Neil Gaiman's Norse Myths, of course, which was again another sort of reimagining of these myths. But what I really found was missing was a sort of a central character. So we're sort of going through the myths and the cycle of the mythology of Norse culture and history, and there wasn't a single character that was sort of focused on. And I thought, well, I'm going to go and pick the really hard one that nobody really knows much about when it comes to the sort of nitty gritty behind Loki. He's not a god. He's not part of the Norse gods. He's actually originally a couple of interpretations, either a frost giant or a more commonly a fire giant, so something like Surt, who is the god that sort of brings the flaming sword down on Yggdrasil and sort of the epic battle at the end. So he's actually a character that's opposed. The giants are opposed to the Norse gods. And I was like, well, how is Loki, who somehow fits in the middle here, what is his motivations? What might be behind how he does things and why, and telling Norse mythology through the sort of it's like a third person way of looking at it, but following a character all the way through the Norse myths, because Loki, like Odin, is one of those characters that's present all the way through. And yeah, I didn't want to write about Odin because I think we have a lot of sort of works out there that focus on Odin and focus on sort of this leader of the gods. And I thought, well, a lot of people have had a look at Loki, but no one's really sort of told the myths as they go through from Loki's point of view.
Okay, certainly one of the things that stood out for me when I read the manuscript when it was first presented was the point of view being Loki's. It's a very strong point of view on Loki's,
Yep.
and actually I felt that was a positive feature. In fact, more than positive, it was actually one of the highlights, I think, of the book, because by being so strictly point of view Loki, you are able to really extend the analysis of who Loki is and how he relates to his environment, both in terms of the people and gods, the
Yep.
beings, as well as the environment.
Yeah.
I mean, is that was that one of your motivations? Was that?
Yeah. I really wanted to explore Loki, and particularly how a character like Loki, who is, according to all the sort of very original texts, the Prose Edda and the Prose Elder, which I read, are both the sort of original texts left over from history that detail these
Hmm.
mythologies. And when I was going through them, and I sort of found like Loki is this character that is bonded like a brother to Odin. And I was like, well, how does a fire giant become bonded to the god of the Norse mythology? And why does he stay there when he's constantly used as a scapegoat or as a kind of tool? He's not accepted within the Norse gods, only sort of a little bit by Odin. He's sort of accepted there, but he's not one of them. And I thought, well, that's a really interesting way to go and explore not just the environment, as you mentioned, how Loki relates to that environment, both the frost, the cold, the heat, the sort of lush landscapes of Asgard, and then down in sort of the depths of hell as well. And I wanted to see, like, how is this character who is essentially malleable, flexible within all of the myths. And the first part I thought of was, well, what if Loki had to leave? Like, he's not part of the fire giants. He doesn't really have any connection to them, except that he is one. And I thought, well, what? This is the part where my reimagining came in. My imagination came in to ask, what if Loki was, sort of physically unsuitable as a fire giant? So these are, basically brute strength, being able to carry weapons, being able to fight, being able to be really physically demanding. And Loki, as a figure, is always sort of described as being quite slight and sinewy muscles, and but very beautiful. And I thought, well, how does that fit into what we have from the fire giants? So I thought perhaps Loki maybe made a deal with Odin. There are some indications that in the myths that Odin gave Loki the physical body that he wanted, which matched his sort of intellect and his wit and his that kind of flexibility of character, as well as body, because Loki is also a shapeshifter. So I thought, well, here we have something that maybe this is how this began. A kind of a trade-off where Loki was fascinated by, at the beginning of the book, by Odin and his brothers sort of making the world of the Norse cosmos, and in doing so, he bonds himself to Odin to have a physical body that is everything that he wants, and everything that sort of is useful and is beautiful to him,
Okay.
because looking up to the Norse gods in kind of sort of a peak of physical appeal and what he wanted. So that's kind of like where I began with that one. And that again brings in a disability factor. You've got a character who has a body that they dislike, and they change it. But in changing it, they indebt themselves to Odin, and are kind of used throughout the myths as I mentioned, as this scapegoat, as this shape-shifting character who can go where the gods can't because he isn't one of them. So he's kind of used as a tool by Odin. And yeah, I was kind of interested as to how that works, how that might have come about, and particularly for Loki, how that changes over time. He starts to become more and more resentful in the myths, until finally you have him opposing Odin at Ragnarok, with this massive army. And you've got, well, how did someone go from being a bonded brother to an enemy?
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean, so that's one consequence. I mean, sorry, not one consequence. In this story, that is the consequence of those things that you mentioned,
yeah,
and sort of steals one of my questions I was going to ask you later. But hey, what the hell? But you mentioned, I mean, what was interesting is that the disability side of it that you originally talked about in the introduction, and
yeah,
then and how you applied it to Loki, that makes sense to me. But what's interesting to me is that there's almost like two things that are happening rather than one. There's the Loki not being happy with his body, and therefore he goes through a journey of uh, of change, of transformation for himself.
yeah,
But at the that's one thing. But another parallelism that's associated with certain types of disabilities, or should I say, the way people are treated, or the way people feel that they are treated, is that if you are not pristinely like the majority in a group, then you become there's a complexity of reactions to you.
yeah,
Not always bad, but sometimes it can be bad, and sometimes and there's degrees of bad as well.
yeah,
And I got that sense in the book too. So it wasn't just a case of him not liking his body, but there was sort of a strange synergy with also other people, metaphorically staring at him and saying, "Well, look, we like you. You're my bonded brother or whatever, but you're not really one of
yeah,
us."
yeah. So yeah, I had that coming from a sort of a journey of my own of disability, of sort of from a invisible disability into
Hmm.
a more physical disability at times, and having that, the difference in the way people treated me and behaved around me, and being conscious of my own body a lot more than I suppose I ever was before. And I was interested in that with Loki, of a character who, has this superb body now, but he's still not one of the gods, and he never will be
Hmm.
treated as one of the gods. He's always sort of this kind of lesser creature. So I wanted to really dig into the stigma that we have around disabilities, and particularly transformation, not just genders and sex, but sort of physical transformation over time, and
Yeah.
really, really have a look at how society treats you, how you feel you're treated by society, and how there's a disconnect there
Hmm.
sometimes.
No, no, look, I really want to emphasize that that was certainly, to some degree, one of the aspects of your book that impressed me, and I absolutely want those who are viewing this interview to appreciate to possibly look at this book, even just for that reason alone, because it's a good one. It's a really good theme. I think it's a powerful theme, and it's incredibly unique to have that theme apply to a reimagining of the Viking, the Norse mythology. So interesting. I mean, and unique. We just lost. Uh, you're back.
I'm back. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, it was only for
Temporary
a few
time
seconds.
shift.
Yeah. Did you hear me just say everything?
Yes, I did. Yes, I think
Okay.
some most of it. Yes, but yeah, I got the end of it, so I think I was
Okay.
there.
Okay. So look, uh, I don't want to dwell on just Loki for all of this interview. Although having said that, its title is Loki, the main protagonist is Loki, the point of view is Loki. Okay, there is a fair bit of Loki, but I think that there may be some people who are looking at this, viewing this interview, who may have minimal knowledge of Viking, Norse mythology, and and possibly there'll be some who will be whose some knowledge is the interpretation of Loki and the gods through popular movies and what have you, like of course Marvel.
Yep.
And by the
Without a
way,
doubt. Yep.
I'm a huge fan, by the way, of the way they reimagined it. And let's be honest, it's a very significant reimagining.
Yep.
Now, in terms of significant reimagining, without giving too much away and without making it crazy detail, but I mean there are some reimaginings that are slight,
Yep.
and that's sometimes the strength of that type of reimagining. There are
Yep.
other reimaginings that are quite radical, and when that happens, it can be successful because it's becomes then an epic thought experiment.
Yep.
Now, between the marginal um, reimagining and the epic thought experiment, your book come?
Um, that's a good question. I'm going to say, I mean, it was a massive thought experiment for me to keep all of Norse mythology and the cosmos in my mind while writing. Um, Also, doing extensive sort of research, going to Iceland, going to Sweden to do some research to see what this country looks like that I'm basically setting this story in, how it feels, and what it's like to be in that space. In that respect, it is a big thought experiment, and it's a big thought experiment in how does Loki um, what is Loki's story, what is Loki's role in Norse mythology. So kind of making that my baseline. And then in terms of reimagining the myths, not so much, not a lot of deviation. They are quite. I probably stay quite strongly to the set of myths as they go along and stories. Um, so I would say both thought experiment, but also, I think Juliet Marillier mentioned it as like a deep dive into Norse mythology. And that's kind of what it was for me. And it was like making this mythology in this cosmos the setting rather than just retelling tales. So for this, it became, in that respect, a reimagining into sort of the fantasy genre, where we have a landscape, a cosmos that I wanted it to feel real, to be, um, you know, a, the map that I generated for the book as well, to help readers who may not be so familiar with what the Norse cosmos looks like, which is just a really giant tree with um, lots of the different worlds and realms within the tree, and there are pathways within the tree, like within a cave system. So yeah, I kind of, in terms of reimagining that, I stuck fairly strongly, quite close to the structure of the Norse cosmos. But again, like having done those trips to Iceland and Sweden to really sort of get the landscape, the environment, and to put those into the realms that are within Norse cosmos. So I suppose, yes, massive thought experiment. Not a great deal in terms of reimagining the myths. It is a very close retelling of those myths, but strictly from the myths are told quite old style, as sort of a poem or a story told very third person, so everyone is covered, all the
Mm.
characters kind of covered, and the motivations are not made clear. So I wanted to, with Loki, to really, yes, the myths are kind of skewed a little from Loki's point of view, because I wanted that to be the character that we explored these myths and this cosmos through. I don't know
Okay.
if that kind of helps.
No, it does help, and I mean, also you've helped also dive a little bit deeper into some of your motivations and some of the things that you wanted to portray in your book.
Yep.
Again, it also helps people understand what they're going to read if they buy your book.
Yep.
But I mean, it sounds to me like though that you've covered the best of both worlds, without, by the way, being mercenary about it. I mean, you've covered. I mean, personally, I'm a bit of a fan of Norse mythology, and so therefore it is nice to be able to dive into a fictional book, but still visit old friends, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But at the same time, as we're sort of reusing the word thought experiment perhaps too much, but what you've done is you've also tangibly shown elements that are part of the reimagining, and that's a good thing too.
Yep.
So no, I think that's great, and
Yep. I'd probably say, yeah, nothing like the Marvel characters, although still retaining, like Loki is still that trickster character that's embedded even in the Marvel and the popular culture stories. Like that trickster character is really strong in all of those. That kind of um, getting himself in trouble more often than not, and I've kind of, yes, that's retained both in Marvel as well as in my book. Which I think, brings all those links back to a Norse mythology and a cosmos.
I suspect that no matter which way you looked at it, you would have ended up that way anyway,
Yep.
because he is, after all, the trickster. Uh,
Yep.
and as you pointed out, you're a fan of tricksters. But are there any other? I mean, I'm still talking Loki. Is there any other parallelisms that may exist between what you've written and some of the treatments in Marvel? And when I talk about Marvel, and I may be putting you on the spot, but I mean, there's the cinematic
Yep.
Marvel, but there's also the comic.
Old school comic. Yes, comic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, are there any other similarities or perhaps even noticeable differences? Other than maybe the obvious difference, of course, is that um, in Marvel, Loki is an adopted son of
Yep.
Odin. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose that's probably yeah, where it's kind of coming from. There are some big similarities and some in having that trickster figure of Loki being who he is, and within all sort of global mythologies and folklore, which is something else that I've worked on with IFWG with my collection Three Curses, um, and looking at those trickster figures have an essential role in all their mythologies wherever they are around the world, and that role seems to be pretty solid. All the other sort of gods and goddesses can change, hierarchies fall, come and go, but the trickster seems to sort of skate through on thin ice sometimes through all of it. And I think, yeah, in terms of even the sort of popular culture, the cinematic actually really drew my attention. I'm a big visual person, and having that massive cinematic effects from the Marvel sort of productions of Loki. Um, Again, that kind of, sort of gave me that real desire to go visit these countries, which are, a long way away from where we are in Australia. I don't think I could get any further except going to the North Pole. Iceland is is pretty remote, and being part of that, and like as I think George R. R. Martin's, Land of Fire and Ice, that Song of Fire and Ice, is again that was set, and parts of the movies taken within locations that I was visiting, and seeing that landscape, which is just so awe-dropping, awe-inspiring, really gave me a grounds for my characters, not just Loki, but sort of what are called the Vanir gods and goddesses, who are sort of the more natural elements. So characters like Freya, who is both the goddess of love and desire, as well as war and death and battle. So she's sort of the leader of the Valkyries. So you've got this really complex sort of character even in her. And she was another character that I wanted to bring out. I wanted to be like, well, why is Freya, in this case, opposed to Odin, and going very, very deeply back into the stories, which Genevieve Cormick wrote a book called Gulvig, called The Witch's Heart, and she looks at the character of Gulvig, who was Freya's mentor, this witch with extreme powers who led the Vanir gods, and to Odin, who was a very much that male, masculine-centered part of Norse culture, couldn't understand how this witch, this woman who had no armor, no weapons, was leading this group of very powerful gods, which they eventually make a truce and join together. And then you have sort of Freya within the gods with Odin, and Loki sort of floating around in there. So there's a lot of disconnects between the two sort of groups of gods, and this kind of shunning of the giants, whether they be frost giants or fire giants. There's both Thor, of course, is even in Marvel, is the giant killer. He's this massive, bulky guy with a hammer. So, it's kind of, getting into that elements of both the environment, which for me was really central to how do these characters fit within the landscape that I'm imagining them, and how does, what does icy realm look like? Well, I went glacier hiking and trot around on top of glaciers, and went into waterfalls full of icy water, and trekked up and down mountains, and stood on the top of volcanoes which were underneath the ice. So kind of gave this, for me, a real richness to the characters and the world that I was building.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have to say, I mean, there aren't. I don't think there are too many fantasy writers who've gone to those sorts of
Thanks.
yeah, yeah, just perfect locations, right?
Yep.
To get the right inspiration, and certainly I did get the sense of that when I read the book.
Yep.
So
I also went when I was in Sweden. I back to my alter ego in archaeology. Again, was fascinated by that sort of physical history that we leave behind. And I went to quite a few grave burials, and sort of seeing how deeply these gods and goddesses were honored within the Viking culture and the Viking sort of era.
mm.
Yeah,
And it was significant. It
it
was
wasn't.
significant.
And that
Yeah.
out of all of them, Loki is the only one which doesn't have a place name, doesn't have a statue or anything devoted to him. So all the other gods and goddesses, no matter how minor, all have these, sort of place names, altars of worship, but not Loki. And I thought that was really interesting. That really sort of said to me, he is not one of the gods,
Mm.
even viewed from the, sort of Norse, ancient Norse perspective. He was not listed as one of them, because there's nothing left in physical markers or even old references to it. So that kind of really struck me as, well, how can he be so central to Norse mythology? Like he's the hinge that all the tales work around, because Odin uses him as a way to do things that he cannot do under sort of guest laws, and under being the god of this particular group. He cannot move against another without starting a war. So he sends Loki to sort of start some sort of trouble, and it often goes very sideways for Loki. No matter sort of how well intended he started off, it often ends up very, very sideways, very skewed, very sort of detrimental to him in the end.
Yeah. I mean, you, I mean, the lack of physical evidence of Loki seems to me to be the ultimate metaphor of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So that's nice. It's a bit sad. It's a bit
It is
sad,
a bit
actually.
sad. I was really
Yeah. Mm,
surprised because I
mm,
thought surely there must be something, but there is absolutely nothing. Not on the landscape,
mm.
not in the records. That sort of said to me, well, that was where I was like, how do I untangle Loki's tail? From being wound up so tightly in Norse myth. Um, you know, why is he here? What does he want? What doesn't he want? What does he end up getting? And how does he work around it? I suppose we could say when everything really hits the fan, um, Loki makes that decision that he is not one of the gods, and he is not going to be treated anymore as a kind of a tool for them. And for their own destruction, even though he can see it coming and he's warning them, and they're doing nothing. It's kind of this dominance of Odin, and that group of gods that fails to see what is in the shadows moving quietly, which in this case I decided to be Freya, because who else better than the leader of the Valkyries, and the sort of this goddess of love, of death, of beauty, and battle, to be sort of the opponent to Odin, and he doesn't see. And especially in this case, because she is a woman, it's a very masculine dominated culture. And I thought, well, the perfect sort of enemy to that is the one that he wouldn't see, which would be female.
Yeah, yeah, I get that completely. The Ragnarok. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it represents an important point in your book,
Yeah,
and it would give too much away. So, taking into consideration that we don't want to give too much away, um, you sort of partially answered the question I want to ask anyway. But just to sort of clarify, um, because you are being fairly close to the Norse mythology, both in terms of the characters, the gods and
yeah,
giants, what have you, but also the some of the events that are well presented in some of the sagas and
yeah,
some of the great poems. The But Ragnarok does feature in the book, and to be honest with you, when I got to that point and I went, phew, I'm glad we got there. It was important. It was
yeah.
important, and I think it was. But I mean, aside from the importance of it, or perhaps trying to clarify why it's important,
Yeah.
can you give me an idea of where it fit in when you started writing, and was it always going to be there? What are some of the techniques that you used, or some of the thoughts you had to make sure that it all sort of culminates smoothly to that?
Yep. I think probably an unusual step I took with the book, which wasn't originally how I wrote it. I originally started at the end of Ragnarok, and that was the beginning of the book. Sort of without giving it away, but probably fairly well known by everyone. It's a slaughter on all sides. And this end of the world epic battle, with sort of no standing survivors. um, I wanted to kind of look. I originally started there, and I thought, right, this is where I'll start it, and I'll tell Loki's tale from the end, sort of go back to the beginning. Um, but that didn't quite fit right with me when I finished the book. When I finally got to Ragnarok, and I finished off the sort of the scenes, the epic battles within them, within this major sort of event, and I kind of got to the point where I'd started. I thought, no, there needs to be a beginning to this. There needs to be a reason why Loki is um, part of the gods, how he ended up here in the first place. And for me, I went through and I did that sort of a prologue of Loki as a fire giant and his transformation and bonding to Odin then. So I suppose my writing process was just like Loki's tale, quite convoluted, and at times I'd pick a scene to write, a particular myth to write, and then I'd look back and I'm like, oh, I've missed an important step. As I went through, like, sort of following the myths, I realized where the hinge points were, and where the major sort of transformation points are in the story, including like Loki's fathering of Jormungandr, the sort of Midgard serpent, this giant serpent, a giant wolf, Fenrir, which is sort of the one that will end the world by swallowing it all with his jaws. And then also this seemingly normal witch daughter, Hel, who all of his children who are witch, Odin punishes because he knows the potential of what has been created. And these sort of three characters are, very much stronger than his own sort of gods and goddesses that he has on his side. And he doesn't, they're sort of joining them, they kind of get thrown into the bucket with, the frost giants and the fire giants and the dark elves, as this kind of things that are opposed to the gods. They are essential characters, and sort of that for me, that was writing those scenes and the emergence of how these characters worked as sort of levers which moved Loki, as well as moved the myths along as well, sort of creating more and more resentment, higher and higher level of resentment in Loki of the treatment of his children, which includes one of his own by his, a goddess who was also badly mistreated, to say lightly, in sort of, the final punishment of Loki.
Okay. I was just thinking, that when you mentioned the way you described this, that in an ironic sort of way, Ragnarok is a very, very harsh equalizer. Yeah, there are always there are consequences. There's lots and lots of consequences, and those are the things that probably aren't worth talking about because you're giving too much away. But it strikes me as that Ragnarok is a type of equalizer for some of the themes that you are portraying, and certainly is an equalizer for Loki himself.
Yes.
I won't say any more because I'm really feeling that we're getting close, to the bone here. But look, I think that I think we've talked enough about your book because we've talked almost entirely about your book, which is good because this is what the whole point of this interview is about. I really feel that this conversation that we've had covers really critical dimensions of your book, and that means that anyone who's watched this all the way through, I feel, will get a very good sense, and that's good. It's good because if they read the book, then they'll get that echoing through their minds. But also, it also assures people as to what they, if this is what they really want to read. This is the other thing too, of course. I don't pretend as a publisher to produce a book that everyone in the universe would love every time. Far from it.
I'd probably say it's very different from Neil Gaiman's Norse myths. I mean, Neil Gaiman is an amazing writer, and he did a fantastic job in sort of making those myths accessible to sort of the general public and general readers, and sort of getting fantasy readers interested, I suppose, into Norse mythology by making it accessible. And I suppose I wanted to borrow a little bit of that accessibility and sort of weave in a bit more of the history and the culture into it. And certainly, again, that point of view of Loki, to sort of hold it in fixed perspective as we sort of go through them, rather than just like a poem, a story, a saga that's told or could be sung, which were probably, the original way of telling these tales. But yeah, I wanted to pick one figure to tell these tales from, sort of a fixed point.
Yeah, I'm trying not to generalize, and I think and so take what I'm saying with an absolute grain of salt. But Neil Gaiman's book is a fantasy where he draws in Norse mythology. I feel that your book is a retelling of Norse mythology that draws in fantasy. I think it's the opposite.
Yeah,
Um, if you want to look at it from that point of view.
yeah,
Like I said, with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, you do go deep into Norse mythology. I think it's worth it. You have a glossary so
yeah,
that people can if because there are tongue twisters, and there are a few letters of the alphabet that are not drawn from the English speaking world.
yep,
Um, but at the same time, I'd like to also make the point that it doesn't make it indigestible at all. It's about throwing yourself into Norse mythology.
yep,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah,
Wholeheartedly go for it.
yeah. Okay, look up to close, or our interview. We've talked all about Loki, so give us a bit of an idea of what's on your plate at the moment. What are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm also writing Gothic horror. So I'm writing a trilogy with PS Publishing, which is Gothic horror, alternate history, again, playing with time and history and places, adding some vampires back in with Bite. Again, exploring disability and sort of queer characters through that. That's a totally different thing to Loki, a totally different beast. And I'm also working on a fantasy with IFWG called Ghost Warrior, which is going to be sort of looking at very climate fiction, uh, very spiritual journey as well. And sort of, yeah, drawing from different cultures and different places in history. So in this time, yeah, looking at Bronze Age characters in Europe and sort of Africa and a lot of North America, a lot of different places and the Viking world, of course, where I could draw these new characters, new cultures to build a whole new world in which, yeah, climate for me is an environment is key.
Yeah, well, I'm IFWG, so I'm interested in that one, of course. Look, I mean, yeah, look, they sound like great. And PS Publishing, by the way, I should make a point
Yes.
that they are a magnificent publishing house based in the UK. I've had personal dealings with them. I've published one or two things myself
Yep.
indirectly through them. So I'm very excited for you for that trilogy, indeed.
Yeah.
I may very well put my name down to get that book early, or those books early.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Look, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We covered some depth that I didn't expect actually, and nuance that I knew about, sort of deep inside, but it's been articulated, and I really enjoyed that. Um, I'm just going to say something to the viewers, and then we'll finalise this. I just wanted to say that IFWG, and I've said this in other interviews as well recently, is an Australian company, and many of our authors are Australian. And But we sell most of our product in North America. That's where the population is. That's how we run our business. And that's why all our logistics is there, our printers, our distributors, and what have you. As a result of that, Australia being in the worst possible place in the universe, or sorry, in the world, I should
in
say.
the world. Yeah,
Yeah,
apart from Iceland.
in terms of supply, is sometimes can be problematic. And what that means is that when we have a world release, sometimes we're able to get product into the warehouses of our partner distributor in Australia, that's New South Books, on in time for a book release. Sometimes it might lag a week or two. Unfortunately, in this case, it's going to lag a week or two.
Yep.
There are some books hanging around. I know you're going to a convention soon.
Yep.
Um, but the reality is that the book is not available or hardly available for another week or two. So people have to have a bit of patience. The ebook is available. If you're an ebook person, go
Yep.
for it. You can even pre-order it now.
Yep.
And there'll be links shown on the screen and also below that will allow you to look at that. What I do ask you to do is, if you notice an Australian company, and I'm talking about Australians here, right? In America, you're hunky dory, you're fine, um, and Europe as well, to be honest. But if you're look at pre-orders from through Australian retailers, you may see a very, very high price attached to the book. Do not pre-order, please. Wait until the books arrive in New South Books, and the prices will go down to what is considered to be a reasonable level. So anyway, I'm just throwing that in. I just want to make sure, because I don't want people to feel like they're getting ripped off, because we're not a company that rips people off. Look, thank you so much. Um, like I said, it was a great interview. And thank you to those who are viewing us. I hope you get an insight into the book. I'm sure you would have got an insight into this beautiful book, and I know that you want to buy it.
You know you want to. Loki wants you to.
That's right, and there's no tricks. There's no tricks. So look, on that note, I bid everyone adieu. See you later.